So coming in and being honest about, okay, I don't have the domain knowledge and don't understand how this company is working, is also giving you from the beginning this leveling field that people can come to you, that you don't know everything, that you are not like this almighty authority, but
Yeah.
you're just like also a human being and people can approach you and you don't know everything. It's not your job to know everything. I think that's quite powerful also as a leader.
Welcome to the Product Weekend podcast. I'm your host, Joao Moita, and today we're exploring the intersection of team alignment, psychological safety, and effective visualization with Christoph Steinlehner. Christoph is a highly experienced product coach, consultant, and the creator of the MAPER framework, a structured method that empowers teams to tackle complex problems, align around shared goals, and foster more open, productive discussions. In this episode, Christoph delves into how visual mapping techniques can not only drive innovation, but also create a psychologically safe environment where team members feel heard and valued. If you're passionate about building stronger, more collaborative teams, this conversation is filled with insights you can start applying today. Before you get started, don't forget to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're tuning in, and leave us a review. Your support helps us bring more inspiring conversations to the Product Weekend community. Now, let's dive into this thought-provoking conversation with Christoph. Christoph, welcome to the Product Weekend podcast. It's really good to have you here.
Hi, Joe. It's really nice to be here. Looking forward to talking a little bit about, I think, psychological safety is the topic.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. You have this very interesting framework, the MAPER framework, and we'll dive a bit into it. The reason why I wanted to have this conversation is because I think this is a very practical tool or approach to increase or to improve the psychological safety when having team discussions, in particular when discussing difficult topics. Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit. But before that, I wanted to hear a little bit about your background, also for your audience to get to know you a little bit, with a particular flavor of sharing also not only how you progressed in your career, but also how your understanding of this topic of psychological safety evolved through those experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Now I'm working as a product coach and consultant. So I help product managers and leaders finding clarity, finding focus in their work. Often we discuss like what to do next and how to navigate difficult situations like collaborations. But I, of course, didn't start my career in this field as a product coach. So I started more than 20 years ago in design roles. So I worked in different design roles. And I think my curiosity brought me there. I liked to talk with people, to work with people, and translate this into interesting products.
Right.
Yeah.
And how did you transition from design to more product focus? How did it happen?
Yeah, it was pretty natural, I would say. So I was a design on a team and I always wanted to understand more why we are doing things, what is like the business narrative. So I also, like in my studies, I had also a big business aspect. So this was something which was interesting for me. I worked more and more also with the business side, also with the reasoning, why are we doing this, going really holistically. And so I like more or less accidentally ended up in product roles.
Yeah. What were those roles and how did you, or maybe when did you first come across this concept of psychological safety? Maybe with another name, but the importance of the team dynamics.
Yeah. So I was completely unaware of this term and about this concept for many years. But when I started my design career, I discovered a method which I still think is really interesting and not like outside of design, not a lot of people know about that. Designers talk about design critique.
Right.
And it usually works like that. So I was like in my first job, I was really junior. I was like just 18, I think. And I was like in an internal studio in a big corporation. we always talked about our work. So somebody brought something up and then a group did a critique about the work. So the important thing is like that it's really talking about the work, really putting out like ideas and reasoning why somebody thinks like that. It's totally not personal. So it's never attacking, oh, you did that, or that's because you're so junior, or that's because you're so old and you don't understand the new trends. It's really about looking at a piece of work and talking about that.
Right.
And that's an interesting leveler, because there, like, I had colleagues who were like 40 years in this discipline, and they still were like open to hear like my input, and I was fresh and new. But it's really giving the ideas, the input, and improving the work. It's always about like improving the work and not attacking each other or having any like personal differences in there.
Is there any particular method or steps to do this design critique, or is it more of a mindset? Like, how do you apply it?
So usually what I think is pretty common is that somebody brings a piece of work, gives the context. So you have a group of designers, they come in, okay, I'm currently working on this. It's in like almost done, or it's like in pretty early sketches. So give a little bit like what kind of feedback you're looking for. It's like general feedback. If you really want to talk about, I don't know, visual details or whatever you're interested, you want to gain from this conversation. And then usually like everybody goes around and says what's not working for them and why it's not working for them. Maybe also they shout out some ideas, but it's then not like you have to do something different, but it's more, oh, I could imagine changing it to, I don't know, a different color theme or whatever. And then you receive all this feedback and you go back onto your desk and work with this feedback. So that doesn't mean that, oh, now 10 people said I have to do this, that, and this, and it's the to-do list. But it's more, okay, this was like an interesting idea and it brought me further, or I don't think this is that valid, what one person said, and I will ignore it, or I will combine new ideas. So it's just like getting feedback and making your mind newly up with this feedback.
So it's a bit the mindset of being really open to feedback, and also when you're delivering feedback that you're not focused on the person, but you're really focused on the thing at hand being discussed, and your objective, and you try to improve it, and you have this belief or this common shared commitment to, we want to have the best piece of work possible, right? In the group.
Exactly.
Cool. And then when did you understand that this was a challenge in many teams? Because I guess at some point before you started developing your framework, you probably encountered a few difficult discussions where these personal attacks and these kind of dynamics happen. When did that happen, and how did you understand this was a problem?
I think it happened, of course, early on. So even there, like my first job, I was like in meetings, and I was like, especially I was pretty young, and due to my role, I was like in quite senior meetings. I was there for doing a lot of intranet stuff. And there I learned that, okay, there's like a lot of egos involved. There are also always like a little bit of a power game going on, and there's things like trust are important. And then also that different people have different incentives. So it really depends on like, why are they saying this? What is their incentive to have this mindset? And without being evil or anything like that, mostly nobody I experienced goes into like a conversation and wants to be like, oh, I will be like now the bad guy there.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what's their mindset? So the different mindsets, and of course, like in our work, I worked always with quite cross-functional teams. So you have like engineers and designers and product people and sales people and marketing people and customer support and so on. And everybody of them brings some baggage or brings some perspective, which we value. But at the same time, we are like emotional and social beings. And this is, of course, especially then when I moved to product roles, this got quite pumped up, I would say, because there you are often between these perspectives. So the engineers are saying like, but it's not possible, or it takes too long. And your marketing team says, oh, we have to really get this out because the market is now asking for that. And the sales team comes and has like a bunch of feature requests. And we all know the situations.
Yeah.
And often what I discovered is that the people are not talking about the same thing often. It's really a lot of misunderstanding mixed into this conversation. So when we express something verbally, it can get quite tricky to be even on the same page because we bring these different perspectives.
Right. Yeah, I mean, thinking of the design example, like if you come with a design and you don't clarify if it's like a final version of the design or an early draft, as you mentioned before, the conversation can derail very easily. That some people maybe start giving feedback about the pixels, making it pixel perfect. The problem is, and the discussion is not about that at all. And it's important to get everyone on the same page, and especially when you have all these people with different backgrounds, with different expertise, and also with different goals. It can be quite tricky to get this alignment and productive discussion going on.
Exactly. And it's quite hard to get like into this collaboration mode often. We pretty easily, I think, fall into a mode where everybody wants their piece forward, where it's like we lose the bigger picture, we lose the okay, it's about creating a better product. Oftentimes we are like just in our islands. We talk against each other instead of talking with each other.
Exactly. Then the situation where the discussions become a bit of a battle to see who wins the discussion, and not thinking of we all want to win together and not see who is right and who is wrong. Yeah, it can be quite tricky. And have you encountered any, or do you have any specific example of a situation where it happened that there was this person with a strong opinion that maybe had more power in the room, and that you've seen that it led to some conflicts and some problems? Is it something you've come across?
Yeah, of course.
Very often.
Of course, often. Totally often. And often what I discovered is that there is quite often like a lack of situational awareness, I call it. For example, I was like in a company working, and there was a quite verbal CEO. And he pushed quite hard on features. And this was like, of course, like a hard conflict with the product teams and with also the CPO. But what was missed is nobody really got deeper into, okay, why is the CEO pushing in this direction? Why is this his view? Why do he think we need this thing?
Yeah.
It was already like unclear, okay, what's exactly the situation of the company? Not a lot of people were aware what the situation is, and where is the pressure coming to the CEO? What pain points does the CEO actually have? And then this natural reaction was like to push something, and people started to push back, of course. And so you then have unhappy situation because the CEO is, okay, guys, why are you not just doing this? It should be easy. And the teams are like, but it doesn't make sense, and it's too hard, and we have so many blockers, and we have so many tech debt, and it's not, we just can't do it. And it's like a complete misunderstanding. The CEO doesn't see what it takes, and the team doesn't see what actually is the problem to solve.
And the challenge that the CEO is trying to solve. Yeah, that's a very tricky situation. That in those situations, I guess the direction is to go back to like first principles and trying to understand like what is it that you're really trying to solve, what's the real problem, and then let's try together to find the best solution. And well, in that situation, what happens is this battle, this clash that ends up not being productive.
Yeah. I have the approach there to get quite concrete. So we used to be abstract and be like, oh, we or just have this feature, and the feature is then like 3 words where everybody has like a completely different understanding maybe, but really going into, okay, what is the user actually doing currently? What are we trying to change there? And going really concrete into the details and externalizing this. Because as soon as we externalize this, we have 2 things going on. The first thing is like we're forced to get concrete for ourselves, because oftentimes it's just like everybody of us betrays themselves in their minds because they don't see that blind spot.
Yeah.
As soon as you put it out there in a visual, in a document, in whatever, that there are like your blind spots. Everybody knows that, I write an email and I just need 2 minutes. And half an hour later, you're like, that's tricky. Oh, how exactly can I describe this? So getting into this concrete mode is quite helpful to express yourself and to have something to then critique. So the second aspect is then look at the thing together and point at the thing and say, like, hey, that's right or that's wrong, or I have a different perspective.
Yeah.
And you're shifting conversation away.
Exactly. And do you have a preferred way or tactic to put it out there, as you were mentioning, and to clarify it? Like, how would you suggest people do it? Open a document, start writing. You mentioned the email, you mentioned visual. Like, what would be your go-to and what would be the first step to start getting some clarity?
So visual mapping techniques. And with that, like a whiteboard and a couple of stickies. And that can be in an office space on a wall, or it can be virtual in a mural board, FigJam, whatever tool you want to use. And then mapping out, like often, the customer steps. What is the customer currently actually doing?
Right.
What are the steps? And this is often done by just a single person to get started, to get like a first perspective.
Yeah.
Then bringing it to the group. So have one thing which the group can discuss. You also can create this inner group, which is sometimes also really interesting. But oftentimes, if you are in a state where the group is not communicating well, it's a quite high effort thing to get the group into this mode.
Right.
Bringing an artifact automatically brings this group into this mode that they're talking about, like whatever you brought. And it's not a PowerPoint, it's not a presentation, which is a medium to convince people. If you're standing in front and be like, oh, that's my PowerPoint and I did this, nobody will critique you, or it's like just details get lost in bullet points.
Yeah. I think one of the benefits of that, at least in my experience, is that when you put it in this visual way with Post-its or with something that doesn't look so finalized, it gives this perspective that, look, this is a work in progress and I'm working with you to achieve the best result. It's not like something that I've done and I have it figured out. We are working together, right?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I also experienced. Bring it like in a scrappy medium, which already looks like it's open for change. That people already are there and want to change it. And also bring it with, okay, I did the thing and I'm probably got some stuff wrong. Please help me to improve it.
Yeah.
So alone this invitation and this mindset, coming to a group, being like, oh, I'm not sure. I don't know so much about the thing. Please help me to improve it. Already invites the group into another mode. It's not like, oh, I brought the thing, please don't. I think it's done. And whoever like stands up and be like, I think you have an error there, gets like a bad look. No, it's really going in there, work on this together further.
I think that's a very practical way to apply some of the key things that we believe are important in psychological safety, is having this humanized leadership, being human
Mm.
as a leader and being vulnerable in the way that
Mm.
I'm a leader, but I don't have all the answers, so let's work together.
Yeah.
And being accessible,
Exactly.
like creating the space and the medium, the channels for people to contribute with their perspectives, with their concerns, with their doubts. So yeah, I think just having this visual artifact that you're collaborating and you're open in front of others puts you as a leader in this little bit vulnerable and accessible position that can be very beneficial to create a psychologically safe discussion. That's a
Yeah.
good one.
And in my experiences, even if it's not the leader who brings that, it helps also the leader to be more one of the equals. Because also for leaders, it's often tricky because everybody knows this, like the CEO drive-by dump. So it is like entering a meeting, being like, oh yeah, I have this random idea. And often from the leader, it's this random idea. They see like, yeah, I just mentioned it. But everybody's, oh, that's like the leader.
Yeah.
He said this.
So now
So we have to do it. And just like in this mode, so everybody can chip in. And also for leadership, it gets more comfortable to be like one of many voices.
Yeah. So in this case, if the leader comes in with this idea, you would add a sticky with this idea to the rest of the stickies, and it's not like the thing that now we need to follow.
Exactly.
But rather
it's not
one
the
idea
red big
adding to the discussion.
Big sticky, which is pasted over everything. It's just like another one of the 200s already there.
Right. Cool. Can we maybe now dive a little bit deeper into the way that you do it in practice? And maybe, if possible, it would be nice if you can walk us through a specific example of a team you've worked with on how it went. Like, how did it start? And then what was the step-by-step?
For sure, yeah. So I call it the mapper method. It's like a meta method, so it's more or less the gist of it goes through a product development end to end with like visual artifacts. It's like a 6-step process. I won't go into any single detail now. I have PDF with a guidebook. Everybody listening to this and want to see also the visual stuff, which is helpful for the thing, should reach out to me on LinkedIn or wherever, and I will send it to them.
Perfect.
But I can talk a little bit like how I came up with that, because I think that was for me a quite interesting time and helped me to put a lot of puzzle pieces I had before in my mind together. So I was in an ad tech company. I was the product lead there, lead of many. And I had the funny situation that I was like asked to move their business model to a more bundles and subscription based model. So they were single license based. And I was in a completely lateral leadership mode. So I didn't have a team. I didn't have like real authorities and no direct reports. I couldn't say to anybody, you have to do it. I had to influence a lot of people and bring a lot of people together.
Right.
And the starting point was like marketing and sales came up with this rough model. And we're like, yeah, that should be easy. We're already selling it like that. Just put it into the web shop and into the licenses and so on. It should be easy. So I was like going out and starting to talk to a couple of people, what is needed. And I found out pretty quickly that it's like a completely mess because nobody knows what exactly is touched there. So what teams, systems, and so on need to be involved. And everybody was a little bit like, yeah, from my side, it's quite complicated, but I'm not sure because I also have these 5 dependencies and I'm not even sure if they can do it. So I walked from conversation to conversation and it got more and more frustrating and complex.
Right.
But what I did while I do this, I mapped. So I had the customer journey of the current customer journey and what I think we need to change, and expanded that to a service blueprint, which is then involving also internal systems, processes, teams, and so on. It was my notes. It was like quite messy also, but coming from a design background, that was like how I worked also before. Totally clear.
Yeah.
But I was all in these meetings, egos clashed. It was like, yeah, it was messy. I got frustrated. Marketing and sales got really frustrated because they think it's done yesterday and the selling season was coming up. But I think more or less accident, or I think that I started with, I had a design leader there also supporting me, and we worked with this document. And with him, it was also always easy to talk about this stuff because we talked about this customer journey, what needs to be changed, what are the complexities, and so on and so on. So I brought this document more or less by accident to the other meetings where I was like, look, I think your team is involved at this step. And I think, if I understand correctly, you have to touch this, that, and this step. And we have to change a little bit here. And suddenly they started to had a better conversation with me because they were like, oh, that's wrong. That's not like how it's actually working. And that's not how the systems are communicating and so on. So suddenly we automatically switched from, I don't understand you really, and you don't understand me really, to, oh, we're talking about the thing and we're just improving this picture of our shared understanding. That we even can talk about the same thing. And since it was quite complex, we could zoom in and out pretty quickly and make connections, and people point out other things, and people say, yeah, but up front there's another team involved. You never heard about them because they're a completely different department, but you have to talk to them because they are creating the data initially. And with that, we pretty quickly could design experiments. We could say, okay, this step here, we don't know really, we should try something, or we have to investigate on a technical side more. So we pretty easily came to, okay, what's the next step to do to improve this? And what's a simpler version and so on. So with that, we went through product cycles without having to understand like everything up front. And we could improve together like this picture. And this was like, it ended up then that we had every week a meeting with the 10 to 12 team leads from all the teams involved. And we could talk through the progress, and we could talk through, okay, what did we discover newly? What was the change? Who has now like a dependency maybe, and things like that.
What does MAPper stand for?
So it's like a short form of the first step is map your thoughts. So as I said before, oftentimes just put something out there. Then the second step is acknowledge perspectives. So go out with that and get like the different perspectives, get something back from the people, and then point out the assumptions and risks. So if you have the picture of a final thing, okay, what are our assumptions in there? What are the risks in there? To then can be like a really small and simple plan and act step to be like, okay, what's our next action? And then from this action, evaluate this for insights. What did you learn? What did change? And then reflect on improve and go back.
Okay. Yeah.
A regular, I think, product cycle. So identifying the risks, designing a small experiment and learn from it. And this based on different mapping methods. And so I often work with customer journeys, service blueprints, as I said, and assumption mapping. So I have one example in this guidebook where I combine service blueprint and assumption mapping. But you can also do Wardley mapping, you can do system diagrams, whatever is like the right fit for the job. Or KPI trees is another thing I often use when we talk about business models, for example.
Right. So it's not so much about what's the specific map that you use, but it's about using a map, then acknowledge that there are people that have different perspectives and different backgrounds and different understandings of the situation. Then you need to like define exactly what are the things that you're gonna work on, do some tests, experiment, evaluate the results of those experiments, and then reflect on what happened and go back to the map. Interesting. Cool. And currently, how do you typically work Do you work more with individuals or with teams when you're doing your
I do
coaching and your?
both. I do both. So in my individual coaching, when I work with like senior product folks and product leaders, I work on them like every week or every 2 weeks, usually is a cadence, on a Miro board, and we map a lot of things out because it helps them to clarify their thoughts. And also to have like artifacts which they can bring to like their teams, to their leadership and so on. So it's like they have something they can think through, and they can also take like artifacts out of our sessions into their like day to day. When I work with teams, I often do like workshops. I often do things like how to improve their like working methods. So I have also like one public workshop which is out there, which helps a team to find which aspects of a product operation model they have in control and they can improve on. Then there are other things like reverse impact mapping, where you take a feature request and bring through a conversation back people to like, okay, what are actually the outcome we are looking for? And so I bring often like these techniques to teams, and then it's a lot of like individual, I call it beast of the week conversation, where it's like some complicated stakeholder situation, some questions about prioritizations, things like that.
Okay, cool. And what's the, this came to my mind because recently I've been having some conversations with some product managers and even some product leaders that are trying to change a bit the mentality and the approach in their teams, but they struggle to be able to do it, to be taken, let's say, for people to go along. And sometimes they resort to bringing someone else with more experience, with more, even if they are doing exactly the same thing as they were doing, just having an external person helps. Is that something that you've seen, that teams or that people in teams struggle to implement these things themselves and they benefit from bringing someone from the outside? What are some benefits with that approach?
Yeah, I think the one thing I see as somebody working from the outside is that you first hand bring another level of trust in there. So your specialist gets brought in for a specific thing. So you have some credentiality already from the beginning. The other big aspect is that people from the outside are independent from the inside politics, are independent from any like trust issues and things like that. So I worked, before I did a lot of coaching, I worked in a lot of interim roles. So I was like for 6 months, for example, at a company. And everybody came to me and be like, yeah, Christoph, you are from the outside. I can tell you that. Because they knew that, of course, I won't be their boss. I won't go to anybody else and be like, hey, did you hear what here Pete said? And this is also a big change. And that's like also when I work deeper in transformations and stuff like that. And I usually work like through hierarchies. So I work with senior leadership and with the team level. And I then can connect dots nobody can connect, because often it's quite hard for a CEO to walk to a team and be like, oh, what are you working on? Because everybody goes, oh, yeah, we have this important thing, and yeah, we're already done. You can't get like oftentimes, just because of the power dynamics, a completely neutral answer.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a good benefit. I'd say also another thing is this part of like mapping and understanding the different perspectives and the different backgrounds of other people. When you're coming from the outside, you have to do it. There's no other way, right? Because you don't have any understanding. When you're inside, it's easier for you to be biased without noticing that you already have this understanding, and you assume that everyone knows what you're talking about. When you're coming from the outside, you're forced to have this perspective from the beginning.
Allowed to ask like the really stupid questions. So a lot of my job is like asking really stupid questions because I honestly don't know. And I know that nobody will kill me for asking this stupid question. And I encourage also other people to ask stupid questions, because often these are like the powerful questions where then people are like, I don't actually know.
Yeah.
It's just, we are doing it like that.
Yeah. That's actually an advice I've received and since then given as well. Not only for people working as externals, let's say, but also when you're joining a new team, when you're onboarding, take advantage of being the new person to ask as many questions as possible to also like to first onboard faster, to have the clarity and the understanding faster so that you can start delivering value in a more efficient way, but also to develop that culture and for people to know that you're coming in with questions, that it's okay to ask questions. Otherwise, if you never ask questions and then after a year or two you start asking questions, people may receive it differently. So I'd say it's a very good thing to start asking questions, and if you can map them out and have this thing, even if just for yourself, it can also be quite useful, right?
Yeah. And especially like in a leadership position. So coming in and being like honest about, okay, I don't have the domain knowledge and don't understand how this company is working, is also giving you from the beginning this leveling field that people can come to you, that you don't know everything, that you are not like this almighty authority, but you're just like also a human being and people can approach you and you don't know everything. It's not your job to know everything. I think that's quite powerful also as a leader to already have some like better collaborations, more psychological safety towards your teams.
Right. Awesome. Cool. We are getting towards the end of our conversation.
Yes.
I'd just like to ask you, what would be first step for someone that has never done this kind of mapping using post-its and this kind of visual tools? What would be the first steps? Where to start?
The easy cheat trick way is to write me and ask for the guide. So you have a really step-by-step guide how to get started with that. The other thing is like start for yourself. So just start and I think like most people are doing that. They have some situations where they work this way, maybe in a workshop or something like that. Bring this towards your day-to-day. Map a couple of things out. Like just write stickies on your desk and shuffle them around and look at them and be like, okay, what do I see in there? What are like the steps of my customer, or how does this system work, or whatever is currently in your heads, externalize it and you will get a new perspective for yourself. Before you bring this like to a group and do a big thing out of it, get used to like think this way.
Cool. Starting with your own mappings to help you think through things and to find the blind spots also in your thinking, and then eventually start engaging with the team and with other stakeholders in this visual way. That's
and as I did, like start for yourself, and by accident you will bring it into conversations.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the suggestions, for the ideas, for sharing your experiences. One thing I also to ask is, with someone you look up to in this field of like team dynamics, leadership, someone that maybe you've worked with that no one knows about, or even like some recognized figure that you look up to, who's maybe one person that you...
There's so many.
It's difficult.
So one person who is maybe not that prominent in the product field, and I think he's doing really interesting work, is Simon Wardley. He developed also like his own method, Wardley mapping. It's mostly a strategy framework or a strategy like way of approaching things. But just his thinking about thinking components, thinking in evolution was for me a really interesting way of looking at the world, like a really interesting perspective. And I think, follow him on Twitter. He writes a lot of stuff, and try to read his book. It's quite long and tricky, but it's the effort that's worth it.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Last but not least, how can people find you, reach out to you, engage? How can you support the audience, and how can the audience support you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is to reach out on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, sometimes more active, sometimes less active, and I'm always happy to chat. I also write about this stuff at Substack under Mapper Club, but you also find that if you find me on LinkedIn, you will find also all the other stuff. And feel free to write me. So I'm a human. I have also sometimes a little bit of free time, and I'm happy to engage in interesting conversations.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, and if people reach out, I hope they have as enjoyable and insightful conversation as we had today. So thank you very much for that. And yeah, we'll see you in the future one.
Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap to our conversation with Christoph. I hope you found our conversation about psychological safety, team alignment, and the power of visual mapping as insightful and inspiring as I did. Christoph shared some incredible strategies for fostering open communication, building trust, and creating clarity in complex team environments. Tools that any product manager or team leader can benefit from. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us and share it with someone who could benefit from Christoph's insights. Your support helps us bring more valuable content to the Product Weekend community. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's topic. Connect with us on LinkedIn or drop us an email at team@theproductweekend.com. Until next time, keep driving collaboration and cultivating safety within your teams.